Thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate you coming. My name is Rick Hutley, and I will kick this session off, but I want to introduce my colleagues, Stephen Tharrett and Clark Kelso. They will introduce themselves in just a moment. We'd like to make this interactive, so if you have questions, suggestions, some examples, please throw those out. And we would like, if we have time, to finish off this session with a kind of interactive session where we'd ask you to pose some challenges and tell us what are the things you're facing, challenged with, and see if we can work through a potential way forward. Okay? Everybody's awake. All right. So we're going to go through it quite quickly. We've got a lot to cover. I want to talk first of all about what is big data and analytics and the Internet of Things. What is it all about and why is it important? What is it doing or going to do to your world? Indeed, to the world in general. We'll then look at a case study, and Stephen will take over and talk about the tracking of medication adherence, and I'm sure various other examples that Stephen may well want to throw in. We'll look at the executive responsibilities. All of you have leadership roles in one way or another. So what are your responsibilities in this era of data? And the new skills that you will require. We'd like to finish off with a very quick roadmap of how do you move forward after today. All right? So let's start and look at the Internet of Things. And as the title says, it's all about data. There's a lot of talk about the Internet of Things. There's a lot of hype, but trust me, it is not hype. It is very, very real. It's been happening for a number of years. It is picking up pace and accelerating dramatically. But fundamentally, the Internet of Things is really about data. The things are merely a means to an end. We have gone through a number of, quote, revolutions over the years. I'm sure there were others before this. The Industrial Revolution, the Mechanical Age, the technological revolution over the last 50, 60 years, particularly here in Silicon Valley. And we are now moving into a wholly new era, the data era. And it's not that any of these others go away. We still use machines. We probably will forevermore. We will continue to use technology and computing. But fundamentally, what is going to drive success going forward from here on is your ability to use data effectively. If we look at the Internet, and it seems incredible, at least to me, that the Internet is only, 17, 18 years old? I mean, it's incredibly young. But in that time, it has fundamentally changed our lives in every way, shape, and form, at work, at home, everywhere. And when we think about the Internet, it's really gone through 4 phases. The first phase, 16, 17 years ago, was the data phase. Some of you may not even remember it. But back then, it was a new phenomenon. And the message was, you need to get your data onto the Internet so that you are visible to the world. That simply meant you need a website. That's it. I was preaching that message 16 years ago for Cisco Systems, running around the world talking to the largest corporations in the world. And it was a hard sell. People didn't understand what this Internet thing was, and yeah, it's not going to have that big an impact. Of course, we now know that that's not the case. But you had to be visible. That's what it was all about. Then came phase 2. This is what became known as e-business. Any of you remember that? The e-business phase. What it was fundamentally about was process. You've got your data out there. Customers can see your brochureware. They know what you sell or do. But now it was about take your business processes and put them online. Automate them. So sales orders, instead of being a piece of paper that got passed around the company, became an online process. Suddenly, our customers, employees, etc., could not only see our data, they could interact with us. We'd entered the interactive phase of the internet. The third phase, which we're predominantly in or have been in for the past few years, is the people phase. Having automated processes, now we start to automate people. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the things to do with you and I as human beings are becoming automated or online. Now, if you've got the data, the process, and the people, the only thing that's left are the things. And that's why we're entering the Internet of Things era. And the numbers here are staggering. I'm going to share some of that with you in a moment. But quite simply, the Internet of Things literally means, please, do come in. We're expecting questions, so the closer you sit to the front, the more likely you are to get your questions answered. The Internet of Things is really very simple in concept. It literally means connect things, everything. So we connected our companies through a website, we connected processes, we connected people through email and Instagram and so forth. Now we're connecting things. This is how big the internet is. There is a prize for anyone that can actually pronounce that. And if you really want to challenge me, I could go out of slide mode. I actually have it written down in text. It's completely meaningless. But this is actually quite interesting. This is the addressing scheme of the internet. So the internet's a bit like the postal system. You know, you have to have a unique address in order that I can deliver mail, or in this case, electronic information to you. You have to have a unique address. And in 2008, the internet ran out of addresses. That was a huge disaster, or would have been, if we hadn't seen it coming. It would be the equivalent of saying to the building industry, you can't build any more houses because we've run out of numbers to put on the doors. So the technology world, particularly our colleagues down in Silicon Valley, introduced something called IPv6 for the technically minded amongst you. Doesn't matter. What it means is that's how many addresses there are. What does that really mean? It means things like this. This is my personal favorite. 6.7 e to the 19 addresses for every square centimetre of the Earth's surface. I can never quite remember how to pronounce that, but it's something like 67 million billion trillion addresses. It's just an unimaginable number for every square centimetre of the Earth's surface sitting in front of you. The point is, it means, it's so big, it's meaningless. It means everything. Everything you could possibly want to connect to the internet could be connected. Every thread of cotton in my shirt or my jacket, everything could be connected. And that's a really important thing to take away from here. There are no limits when it comes to the internet. It can be connected. And if it's of value to someone to connect it at some point, it will get connected. And that is what is happening with the Internet of Things. We did some research, my group, back in my Cisco days, to look at how many things are connected. And of the things that we could usefully connect, about 99% of them, actually 99.4 according to our math, are not connected today. And I ask you to do a thought experiment. You probably have, maybe not on you right now, but you probably have, let's say, a laptop, a tablet, and a smartphone. Yeah? If you're a real geek, you know, you've got a fancy watch too. Maybe 4. Now, look around you at all the things that are not connected. Your coffee cup's not connected. The pen and paper's not connected. My glasses, here's something I wish, see, I've lost them already. My glasses are not connected. Your clothes, your shoes, your car, everything, most of the things, 99% of the things in your life are not connected today. And they are being connected in their billions every year now. So in the next few years, your world is going to change radically. In fact, you've already seen this starting to happen more and more with cars, for example, that are now connected to the internet. They know the traffic jams, they can self-park, they can tell if a car 3 rows ahead has decided to slow down and so forth. It's already changing our world. This is a really important thing to sort of walk out of this door with and appreciate. Our world is changing radically. Everything is being connected, and it will change everything. It is predicted that the Internet of Things will have a 30 to 35 times greater impact than the Internet had on our lives. So if you thought the Internet changed things, watch this space. Talking of impact, how much impact? So we studied that too. Is this really worth worrying about? Is there enough money in this? There's other things that drive life than money, but it tends to be one of the biggest drivers. So is it worth worrying about? And the answer is yes, it is. We estimate that there will be up to a $19 trillion impact over the next 5 to 10 years. About 4.6 of that is in the public sector, the other 14.4 is in the private sector. These figures are obviously fairly squishy. It rather depends. Where do you put things like healthcare? Is it considered private hospitals, or is it considered part of the public sector, and so forth? It really doesn't matter. Is it really going to be 19 trillion, or is it going to be 17 trillion, or 21 point? I don't know. I don't care, ends in a T. So that's a pretty big sum of money. Now, if we look at that and say, well, what's this value at stake? What do I mean by value at stake? This is approximately half of that value is money that will be made or lost. It will hit the bottom line, and it will be how well you use data and the Internet of Things. So using data, let's say, to drive down costs and become more efficient, or perhaps to create new services and increase revenue. But half of the value will come through bottom line impact. The other half will be through things where money shifts from one industry or one company to another. In other words, it's at risk. Those companies that don't get on board with this will be severely disadvantaged. And if companies don't think that that's real, if you think that's hype, just look back at what happened in the internet era and how many companies, major companies, went out of business because they didn't get on board with the internet era quickly enough. So it's happening a lot faster than the internet. It's going to have significantly greater impact than the internet, and it's going to be all-pervasive. We looked around the world. It's every industry, and there's just a few, every industry, every geography around the world. Any questions so far? Everybody convinced it's important? Yeah, oh, good. Otherwise, I'd have been in trouble. So if we looked at, so what are some of the things that people do with this? You talk about trillions of dollars in the private sector, for example. It's actually the same set of things, if you will, in the public sector. They're just given different names. But asset utilization, 2.5 trillion at risk over the next 10 years. Asset utilization of the assets that your company or function department has, how well are you using them? One question I often ask companies in my consulting world is, do you actually know how many of your widgets you have, whatever your widgets are? How many widgets have you got? And they don't know. They've got a rough guess. They've got financial reports that say, yes, we've got 110 million widgets. But I say, yeah, but how many exactly? And where are they? Do you actually know where your widgets are? Do you know if they're working or not working? Who's got them? Which of your employees is using them? And so forth. We don't know these things because it's just too hard to track. So what happens is we order more widgets when we don't actually need them because we don't want to run out. Widgets are important things. So we'll order more widgets in advance. And then we stockpile them. Warehousing costs, purchasing costs. So if I could use my assets more effectively, I can reduce my costs substantially and improve my speed to market, my service to my customers, and so forth. Employee productivity. Where are your people? What are they doing? Is there a way of harnessing their services more effectively? Similar to assets, but these are human assets. Supply chain logistics. If I can do all of that for myself, can I do the same thing in my supply chain? And the answer is yes, you can. And ultimately, can I change the customer experience? Customer experience is the only sustainable differentiation. Ultimately, anybody can copy your product or your service, even public services I would dare to suggest, because it can be outsourced and so forth. Customer experience is what causes a customer to choose you over someone else. And finally, innovation. With all of this connectivity, all of this data, we are being able to see our world like we have never seen it before. We can see those widgets, we can see the employees, the customers. And through analytics, which I'll touch on in a minute, we can even predict what our customers are thinking and are going to want or need, and so forth. Again, if you have any doubt on that, just look at Amazon or Netflix, etc. Netflix's ability to predict what videos you're going to watch, that's how they serve up the website. When you go to Netflix website, it's not the same website that I see. It's customed because it predicts what will be of interest to me. So it's happening. Innovation is the name of the game. Harness the data to drive down your costs, increase revenue, and innovate. I wanted to share a few examples, just a few. I've got hundreds of others. If you want to throw any out, that would be great too. Here is one of the most underestimated and potentially misunderstood devices around, the smartphone. Hands up anybody who does not have a smartphone. Thank you, sir. There are very, very few people in the world today, certainly in our world, that do not have smartphones. But look at what it's capable of, what I refer to as digital exhaust. That device has inclinometers, accelerometers, cameras, microphones, touch sensitive. It can speak to you, play video, light sensors, fingerprint control, magnetometers, and so on and so on. It's got more sensors than you could possibly imagine and can tell everything you do. GPS, we know exactly where you are in the world at any given point in time. I have built systems where we could literally watch you walk around and see where you're going. I can see you as you walk around a retail store. I built a system for a well-known company that I won't mention, where 3 steps inside the door, I knew whether you were on your own, with a partner, whether you were a family unit. I could even do age profiling. I knew whether you were a teenager, middle-aged, or elderly. And based upon that information, as a retailer, I knew exactly how to treat you. Leave the teenagers alone. They're going to go over to the CD section. There's no margin in CDs anyway. Leave them the hell alone. You know, this lone, middle-aged individual's gone over to the hi-fi section. That's my target. I can see the aisles you walk down, how long you spend there, how long you look at a product, whether you turn it around and so forth. I can predict when you're going to buy that product because I see you turning around the other end of the store for the 3rd time to head back in that direction. That's the buy signal. Make sure we've got a sales representative around there. Or better still, I'll send you a message to your smartphone giving you a one-off deal if you buy that product today. Incredibly powerful devices. I don't think people realize just how much information they are giving off about you every single second. That's not to scare you. That's not to say take it off. The problem with these things is we know it happens, but we can't live without them. bit like credit cards. You know. Security is a big question that often comes up. You take a credit card in a restaurant, you give it to a complete stranger who walks off with it. You know that there's a risk there, but you want the benefit of the credit card so you don't argue. Same thing here. Connected things, knowledge, on-demand knowledge. This is it's actually a mock-up. I'm not sure if it's real yet. But this is using the smartphone. So take a situation where you've got let's say a vast geography, China, the Midwest of the US, or wherever. You don't have enough employees to run around and look to see if that lesion on their arm is a virus, or maybe it's a cornfield and is it an infestation that you're concerned about. You don't have enough people. So how about employing the general public as a surrogate workforce? Build an app and allow them to use their smartphones to not self-diagnose, but at least do some preliminary tests to say, yes, you need to go see your doctor, or no, don't worry about it, it's a heat rash. Or that's not the bug we're looking for in the fields, ignore it. In this case, information, the knowledge required to determine whether that is or is not something to be concerned about, is coming from the cloud. Experts put the data in the cloud. All the app does is take the picture, send it to the cloud, get it processed to come back down and say, yes, be concerned or don't be concerned. But it's a way of harnessing the general public or your employees en masse, no longer dependent upon a few experts. Another interesting one, Vessel. Vessel came out with this product about 6-8 months ago, I believe. This is a drinking cup. It can tell what you put inside it within 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah. Unlike us, it can tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi, apparently. But what's important is if it knows what's inside it, then it knows what's inside it. It knows the fat content and the chemical makeup and the calorie levels and so forth. Imagine linking that to your dietitian or to your doctor who says, and then it says, you can or can't have that drink. Okay? Many of us have got things like Fitbits, they give you biofeedback about how many steps you've taken and so forth. This is kind of the same thing, but in this case, the drinks area. It's giving you biofeedback. You can't drink that. It's got too much sugar in it. You've already had your quota for the day. Think of the research implications that doctors and dietitians and researchers can now get accurate information about what people are doing. Well, you've bought it, sir, so I'm afraid it's yours. You just can't drink it. That's right. We laugh, but someone will come up with it. Someone will. Yeah, I like that, yeah. Sort of a little stun as you try and drink it. But this is real. It exists. Connected buildings. For most corporations, I think, of any industry, there are 2 major expenditures. If you look on a pie chart, they're the biggest part of the pie chart. The first is people, human costs, salaries, and so forth. The second are buildings. We spend most of our money on buildings. Making them more efficient. This company, Building DNA, is building out intelligent buildings where you can retrofit the building with sensors everywhere. For example, you have a fire in a school, and these can tell the fire brigade in advance exactly where everything is in the building. It could track the fire brigade walking around the building. It could do checks automatically to say, that corridor here, it doesn't meet code now. There's not enough fire extinguishers in that part of the building. Smart vehicles. This is the much vaunted Google car. They actually run around down near where I live. This is an image of what the car sees. I don't know if you can make this out, but here's it. Here's the street, and you can see trees along the street and people. It can, through predictive analytics, tell when that person is about to walk off of the footpath into the roadway. before the person themselves may even realize that that's what they're going to do. And the reason for that is simple. As human beings, we don't walk in perfect straight lines. You don't walk up to the edge of a road, turn 90 degrees, and then step out. You start to curve, even before you've even thought about it. And that slight movement can be detected by the radar systems, and it says that person's about to walk out into the highway. Again, sounds far-fetched. Is it really that good? You've seen the TV adverts now, I think BMW, Mercedes, and others, that can not only tell if the car in front is braking, but it can tell if the car in front of that is braking. So these things are using a lot of data and predictive analytics. Robots, lots and lots of robots. We're familiar with robots in manufacturing plants. This one is, for example, a security robot. It wanders around those buildings and has all sorts of sensors on it. It doesn't get sick. It can predict when things are happening. It could, for example, go back to that corridor and say, you know, it used to meet fire code until somebody stacked those cardboard boxes in there last night. Now it's no longer compliant. FedEx, here's a revenue generation example. Federal Express's customers said, I need to know more than just that the box is on the truck for delivery. Ideally, I'd like to know a lot more about when is it actually going to be delivered. But more importantly, for some products, they said, I need to know things like temperature range. You know, this is maybe medical supplies, and it cannot exceed certain temperature guidelines. So I need a way of tracking the package and knowing whether or not it had undue vibration, undue temperature, or humidity, or whatever. So FedEx turned that into a new revenue-generating service. For a small nominal fee, you can purchase, or rent as it were, one of these sensors that they put inside your package, and now you get accurate information about where it is and what it was exposed to during transit. 3D printing. You've probably heard about that by now, but we can print some amazing things. Up to 22 human tissues can be printed right now. I think, a different slide. Usually I show the one with skin. This is an ear, you know, a liver and so forth. But take something like skin. You know, they just take a small biopsy, put it into a test tube and smush it up, however medical people do that. Put it into effectively an inkjet printer. It's a medical grade inkjet printer. And they print skin. The beauty is, your body doesn't reject it because it is your cell. So the concept of waiting lists for transplants and so forth will disappear. No longer going to the dentist and then having to come back in weeks later for that crown once it's been made. They'll print you a new crown in the dentist's office. These fundamentally change the business model. Could be a farmer out in the middle of a field that needs to replace something. Why go 50 miles into the nearest city to get that replacement when they could print it back on the farm? All these parts, by the way, are printed as one piece in many cases. Fully articulated, fully work. Quite incredible. And this will revolutionize and change many business practices, business models. And the other one with connected vehicles, this is actually, I think, Volvo have put hundreds and in some cases thousands of sensors into your car. And they use that, capturing terabytes of data, not only during the manufacturing process, but when you've taken the product home. It gives them enormous insight into how their customers are using their product. How fast do you drive? When do you drive? Do you go on rough terrain, saltwater area, whatever it is? And from that, it helps them design the next generation of car or product, but also to provide new services to their customers. We've noticed that you spend a lot of time in high salt area. You live near the coast. We therefore recommend a different service regime for you. Ignore the service manual. This is a custom one just for you. Research potential is enormous as well. And where is it going? This is an example of a future wearable. These are called biostamps. They're waterproof. They don't last forever, but you stick them on your body. They're waterproof, pretty rugged devices, and you can put any number of different sensors into that biostamp. It could, for example, be testing your body. Your body emits various chemicals. It could tell, for example, if you're in danger of going into a diabetic coma, or maybe that you've drunk too much. Don't drive the car. It's testing your alcohol level. Obviously, it can test things like temperature and so forth. But a whole range of things that it could be testing. Waterproof, you can put it on sports folks who can dive into swimming pools and all sorts of things. And the final one, the connected home. Any of you got an Amazon Echo? Yep, me too. I like it. This is kind of like Siri on your desk for the Apple amongst you. Cortana if you're a Windows person. But basically, this device sits in your home. It's got 8 microphones around the top. It can hear everything you do and say in the room. It's got an active word, so you usually refer to it as Alexa, which is the name they give it. And then you can ask her all sorts of questions and ask her to do things, put things on the shopping list for you, set a timer, tell you when President's Day is. And they keep adding and adding new services to that capability. So now they're connecting in your home. The point of this story and this example is not so much what it does, but why they did it. Amazon looked at their world, their customers, and said, how do we help our customers buy more from us than maybe going somewhere else and buying? And their problem was the decision to buy is made in the home, and Amazon wasn't in your home. So how do we get into people's homes? How do we get into their lives and make it easier for them to use Amazon versus buying from anywhere else? So they came up with this and said, put this in your home and it'll do lots of interesting things. It will tell you the temperature, it gives you the news, it will play radio stations from around the world and so forth. So it's kind of a handy little device. But the other thing that it does from the Amazon perspective is shopping lists. I can say to Alexa, add mushrooms to the shopping list, and she does. What I can then do is say, buy that stuff. And Amazon will place the order and ship it to me. It makes shopping really easy. I don't even have to get out of my chair, let alone get in the car. I can shop with my voice and just have it delivered. And then the other drinking vessel will tell me just how obese I'm becoming. So, things are not enough. It is all about data. I want to very quickly cover big data. How am I doing on time?
You're doing just wonderfully on time. I have a question though first. It's a place for me to add something. Oh, by the way, how many of us have actually tried the Amazon deliver in 1 hour thing? Yeah, it's pretty cool. If you haven't tried it, I haven't thought about the shopping list there, but I may have to get that device. That's really cool. The question I had, I want to go back to your the intelligent car. Actually, I'm going to ask a question that's not so much about an intelligent car, but just normal cars. I'm Clark Kelso. I'm the receiver in charge of prison medical care and have been around in state government for about 15, 20 years. One of the things that, one of the problems we have in corrections, and I know it's a problem that General Services has had, and I assume a handful of other departments, is a good fleet management. You know, when you were saying do you know how many of widgets you have? What came through my mind is the innumerable audits by the Bureau of State Audits on fleet management, where every time they do an audit, nobody knows how many cars they seem to have. Nobody knows where the hell they are. We don't know what their condition is. And I'm going to assume that most of you in the room here come from a department that may have one or more state vehicles. Now, I know that just in the last year, just in my own private car, my insurance company has sent me a device that I plug into the universal, whatever that plug is. Yeah, and then it then transmits my driving habits and patterns, and I get a little bit of an insurance discount so long as I don't drive recklessly. But it also keeps track of a lot of other information from the car. And as you were talking, that suddenly occurred to me, well, wouldn't that be a great way of doing fleet management? Because I'll bet these devices don't cost can't cost very much. And you actually would know where all of your cars are. You'd have a driving history. You'd know whether cars are getting in a state where they need to be repaired. And I guess I was sort of wondering, has any department done anything like that yet? Yeah.
Yeah, we have quite a few departments that use fleet management systems. I'm not in government, along with Verizon. And yes, definitely fleet management for different departments. We've discovered that a lot of things that we thought were driving were actually sitting and doing a lot of idle time. So that also is a carbon impact.
But this is the thing where you can plug in, when you say fleet
Yes,
management.
fleet management for entire fleet, like say if it's for the garbage trucks or say it's for service vehicles. Not only does that provide insight into the operations, as well as make sure that someone is not having a lot of idle time, not working, but also too, we notice that there's a lot of pushback sometimes from departments that don't want that much insight, but it really is a very productive tool for the public sector as well as the private sector.
Anyone who's working in government who's had experience with this?
Yes, Department of Water Resources.
Yeah, you do it.
We implemented a fuel management project. And part of that project was to plug in a device into the J-Bus, as you were speaking about, in the vehicle. And we have receivers at our sites that actually capture the vehicle mileage and a lot of other data that you were mentioning that is transmitted, and we capture that so that we can maintain our fleet. What we found was at the pump, individuals putting fuel in, when they put the miles in, could put 3333, for example, and enter, and they just go on, because their objective as workers is to get fuel.
Yeah.
The data that goes along with that doesn't impact them, but it impacts the fleet management people who want to maintain the vehicle and have it in for service for those 12,000-mile services. So what we did is we capture that information. They do no longer have to put it in manually, and we're capturing it directly from the vehicle, from our fleet.
Oh, that's a great news.
And one of the direct benefits is that we notice that these departments have had a decrease in their insurance costs as a result.
Any other examples?
So just to add, before I worked in the government, I was working for Mercedes and Volkswagen. And they had something very similar to LoJack. And so what it was is customers, $1,000, you'd sell it, you made crazy profit on it. But it did just that, and I ran a program called AutoAlert that was able to track how many miles you're driving, what's your pattern coming into service. So by just knowing how many miles are in your car, there's a lot of analysis behind how often you are trading your car in, if you're a lease or if you sell. And everybody thinks you make a lot of money in sales. You don't. You make the majority of your money in service. And so we were actually able to make money on the service and then go and sell them the car. And so we knew how much they were paying. We knew their purchase history. We knew a lot of information. But all by plugging a little car jack thing.
Well, it just occurs to me, and I'm going to mention it back at CDCR, because we have issues with fleet management that we don't handle terribly well. Those of you who have departments that have cars, you might advise somebody that one of the things you learned here was maybe you can do a better job of fleet management. You can potentially reduce costs. You may be able to avoid bad audit results because historically the fleet management has been a weak spot for us. And it seems to me Department of Water Resources should be a resource for everybody else about how to do something like this. My guess is they've figured out how to make this cost effective so that you can pass the Department of Finance test for is this something that's worth buying. My guess is just on the savings of fuel and knowing where your fleet is, that by itself pays for it. So that's just a thought.
Let me generalize that discussion. It's a great discussion. Thank you, Clark. Generalize that. Fleet management, what you just discussed, is simply an example of I have an issue Or rather, I have something I'd like to know. I'd like to know how well our fleet is working, or I'd like to reduce the costs of our fleet, or I'd like to be able to sell customers more than we sell them today. The point with the Internet of Things is, if you want to know those things, you need the data. If you're not getting the data today, connect it. Stick something on it. Put a dongle-y thing into the car, or some other way of collecting the data. It doesn't have to be big brother-ish. There is a definite concern around security and privacy and so forth. But it doesn't have to be threatening. When you analyze the data, you can find out some really interesting things that you just didn't realize before. UPS, I believe, did this. They captured the data, did some calculations, and worked out that if they told their drivers to always turn right, they saved tens of millions of dollars. Because in time saving and so forth. It was simple stuff, but you don't know those things until you start capturing it. Fleet management, I had a few other examples which I didn't put in this deck, but yeah, many companies are now using the Internet of Things and data to do fleet management. One of the things, for example, is without it, drivers come back to the central depot to pick up their next job, and then they go out on the next one. With a connected fleet, you can actually direct the fleet from real time wherever they are, and they don't have to keep coming back. You can detour them and say, go over here and do this one first. You mentioned waste disposal and such. We did that in Barcelona. We connected all the trash bins up. We're using the Internet of Things. So now the garbage trucks didn't go out on a routine basis to collect garbage when a third of the time the bins were empty. They went out when called. I forget the figures now. It saved them like 50 million a year, and they had N number of less trucks they needed to order and all sorts of things. But some great examples. And I've got lots more of those, so if you have other questions. It is about data, and I'm not going to go through this in huge detail. You'll hear this term big data. And what does that mean? There are many descriptions of what that means. Generally, it means volume. It means there's so much data that you can't get it onto your computer and process it like you used to in the past. It's truly big. But there's more to big data than volume. It's also about variety, velocity, and location. I couldn't think of a V for location. But variety and velocity, it's a different type of data now. Historically, data was transactional. That's kind of what you got on from your finance systems, your purchase order systems, and so forth. Transactional data. It's still there. It's still incredibly important. But in the Internet of Things era, it's real-time interactive data. Think of all of the cameras that you see in a retail store or around your departments. Those cameras are generating 30 frames a second. Okay? That's not a transaction. Those are events. That's pieces of data occurring many, many times a second. Different type of data. Real-time data. Transactional data is batch. You deal with it at the end of the week, end of the month. This is real-time data. Very, very different. The large majority of data out there today is of this new real-time. A lot of it's video, whether it's YouTube or security cameras. Velocity, as I say, it's happening in real time. And location. It doesn't happen in the data center. It happens in the local retail store, or it's happening in the warehouse of your facility, and so forth. Now, what we have to do is we have to capture that data, consolidate it, analyze it, and act upon it. Capture is fairly straightforward. You need to capture it. Consolidate, because you don't need 30 frames a second from that security camera. You don't need 1 frame a second. You need the 50 frames of video that occurred at 2 a.m. in the morning when something moved in the warehouse and you weren't expecting it. That's what you need. So you consolidate the data down and then analyze it. Predictive analytics, all sorts of other kinds of analytics, and I've got a slide that will come on to that in just a second. But most importantly, you have to act upon it. If you don't act upon it, what was the point? So, analytics of data falls into 3 very broad areas. The first is the past. These are the analytics that we've been used to up till now. Could you get me a financial report? Reports generally mean the past. Get me a sales report. What did we sell last month? Get me a finance report or a fleet transport report and so forth. Still very good stuff. Absolutely need this. But it's really about what happened in the past. Descriptive reporting. Today we are capable, through the Internet of Things, to do the present. We can do monitoring. Those video cameras, again, are monitoring in real time. Many of us now have sensors in our homes, motion sensors and IR sensors, to determine is someone inside our house or doing things. So this is what is happening. And the real exciting part that most people are interested in, of course, is the future. What is going to happen? Predictive analytics and something that's called prescriptive analytics. Predictive analytics is saying, if I know what's happening now, and I know what that meant in the past, I can predict what it's going to mean in the future. This piece of machinery is starting to get warm, and I know when the machine gets warm, it will fail in days or weeks or months' time, so I can predict that we need to maintain or do something to this machine now, or it's going to break down within the next week. That's very costly, so I can take preventative maintenance. Prescriptive analytics is a bit like a chess game. It's saying, okay, I know I've got to do something, but what do I do? I could replace this, I could replace that, or I could do something else. What is the best course of action? So think of it like a chess game. It's trying to work out which of these actions will give me the optimal outcome. Okay? Another way of looking at analytics, and this is just, again, a smattering, from reports through text mining, time series analyses, fraud detection, machine learning, simulation, forecasting. There are a whole range of ways in which we can use the analysis of data, or analytics, to help us make more informed business decisions. Heretofore, we made business decisions based on a guess. How many of us do routine maintenance? No one? Yeah, everybody does routine maintenance. The word routine means we didn't know. We're just guessing. Based on the past, we guess that a piece of equipment needs to be serviced every 6 months. Whether it likes it or not, we're going to service it every 6 months. Because we had no better way of knowing. That's a very inefficient and costly way to run your business. Through the Internet of Things, we can now say, I can see whether that piece of equipment is starting to run hot or cold or vibrating too much. I know, therefore, exactly when to maintain it and when to leave it alone. So, this kind of summarizes it all. The Internet of Things, connecting all these things. Remember, we're connecting them in their billions every year. We predict there's about 10 billion things connected today. There will be, I think it's 50 billion devices is predicted by 2020. I can tell you that that's wrong, because we're about to see an example in the medical world where they're already connecting trillions of things. Anyway, a whole heck of a lot of things getting connected. Billions and billions of them every year. That's opening up big data, which is giving you visibility, insights into your world like you've never had before. You can see your widgets, your employees, your customers. You can predict things. That is what will then enable you as companies, as departments, to innovate and be creative and stay ahead of the curve. And ultimately, that's what leads to the business results, which is often dollars, but not always. But it leads to the results you're looking for. And I've already mentioned the $19 trillion at stake. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to talk to you about a particular example, and I'm sure throw in a few other little stories on his way.